everybody, welcome to Big Boys Toys. I'm James. We're out here in the garage today, and pretty soon we're going to be in the 84 928S right behind me. Subscriber named Elias wanted to know more about the 84, and since I haven't done an in-car video in a while, I thought we'd take the opportunity to check out the 84. We're going to look under the hood, inside, and go for a drive. Elias, this one's for you. Let's do this. Here's the heart of a 928S. It's the 4.7 liter single overhead cam V8 engine. And in the early S cars in the US, actually all the cars in the US up through 84, we got what we call the spider intake, just because it looks like the body of a spider and it's got, 8 legs as the runners. It's kind of cool. This is definitely not my cleanest engine bay, so I apologize for that. I just can't reach much of it from a wheelchair though, so they tend to get a little dirty, and unfortunately they stay that way. Up at the front you have this bar here that controls the lights. It's got the motor right here that turns this bar, and the lights are connected to this bar, so if you had the hood open and turned the lights on, you'd see that bar rotate and the lights would pop up. Of course, you've got the electric fan on the radiator with the AC compressor or the AC condenser right up there in the front. And this car has a brand new radiator from about 3 years ago. I did the water pump, timing belt, tensioner, all the usual stuff. The last time I started it and drove it, it ran great. So we'll see how it goes today. It's a great car though. I have an interesting story I'll share with you shortly on how I acquired the car. Standard interior on a 928. This one's a bit dusty. I apologize for that. Didn't have time to grab anything to vacuum it out or clean it up, but it has the original speakers in the doors, so they're probably about shot. It has an aftermarket stereo head unit that was not properly wired in the first place. So it is ridiculous, sounds terrible, looks out of place. We're going to fix that at some point and put something else in, preferably a Blaupunkt that's a current model that looks like an old model so that it would have Bluetooth. I can't remember if I think it's called the Bremen, but I'm not sure. But it's exactly what this car needs. The dashboard on this car was redone about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I guess now. And the vinyl that they used has more texture than the leather that was used in this car. So it's not an exact match. And as so many interior shops do these days, they put a small bit of padding underneath that vinyl. And what that does is it makes the defroster vents not quite fit as well as they should. Now, we got them in this car okay, but they're not great. But you can see here on the door, the leather on the door is a different texture than the vinyl on the new dash. But the dash was really, really cracked. It didn't have leather on it. I think it had originally been a leather dash, and they peeled it all off because the leather was all warped anyway, so they just took it off. So I had that replaced. It looks better than it did, that's for sure. But you can see also where the glove box door and the center console don't quite fit as precisely as they did when this car was new. The seats I also had redone. I bought the vinyl kit off of eBay. The leather kit was super expensive, and I had a friend who did this in his car, and he did it in my car. He replaced the vinyl in my car, but he didn't do a great job of it. So they need to be pulled and redone, and frankly, they need to be pulled and redone with leather. You can see up here at the headrest where it just doesn't fit right. And it was a bit disappointing, and I think that part can be fixed. The passenger seat's a little bit better, I think this can be fixed without a lot of trouble. I have another friend who did this same deal on his car, and he did a much more careful and precise job of installing the kit. So I think I might be able to talk him into just fixing that little bit for me anyway, and that would be a lot better. But the original seats in this car and door inserts were bright red, and the leather on the seats was just destroyed. And the bright red and burgundy, man, I'm sorry, that just does not go together. So I had the rear seats re-dyed in black, as well as the center console in black. And they look fine. Not great, but they're fine. I mean, it's an old car. It's an 84. It's got 115,000 miles on it or something like that. The odometer says 114.7, but I'm not sure that the odometer is actually working right now. When I got this car home, one of the things I was really happy to find in the door pocket was this little binder here. It's a tiny little binder. And it has basically all the service history of the car. Really cool. Shows who it was sold to right here. It was, I guess, a company car, though I have a hard time believing you would be able to write this off these days as a company car, but maybe you could. And it shows, actually it doesn't show much about him, does it? And then it shows when it was sold to the next person in '88, so the original owner had it about 4 years. And then, you know, it just goes on and through the years, what all was done to the car, how much it costs. So it's not quite as good as having the actual receipts, but it's pretty close. And the second owner, at least I presume I'm still on the second owner here, did a really good job of keeping track of all of the maintenance service on this car and the history. And then when I got it, I tried to do the same. Not sure I did quite as good a job as the original owner did, but yeah, we've just kind of kept this car up and just kind of goes on and on. Before I put my wheelchair in the car and get rolling, let's do a cold start and see how she sounds. A little lumpy. There she goes. Sounds pretty good. Temperature's cold, of course. 3/4 of a tank of gas, idling just under 1,000. Oil pressure's all the way to the top. Ammeter probably a little low, not quite 13. A little bit low maybe, but not bad. And it's probably just due to a ground corrosion issue, not actual problem with the alternator. All right, I'm gonna get my wheelchair in here and we'll get rolling. Now let me tell you the brief version of the story of how I ended up with this car. In the early 2000s, I guess it was about 2003 or 4, a friend of mine through the Porsche Club knew that the only thing that I lacked in my 928 collection was a 928S. And in 2005, I believe it was, it may have been 2006, they were participating in an auction, a car auction, or at least had received a brochure for a car auction, and noticed this car in the brochure and that it was going to be up for auction. And they remembered me and were like, hey, James, here's a 928S in a car auction. You might want to bid on it or whatever. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay, well, that looks pretty good. And so I called the auction house because it was up in Dallas, I think. And I didn't want to go to Dallas just to bid on one car and potentially not come home with a car. It's not that long a trip, but it was long enough that I didn't want to make it. So I called the auction house and I said, hey, I want to bid on this car. Can you call me when the car comes up, you know, on the through the showroom, or however it is that they were doing, through the tent or whatever they were using. And they said, sure, we'll call you. And so I got a call later on that day of the auction, which was a couple of weeks out at the point of which I contacted them. And they said, hey, we're really sorry. That car already came across the blocks and we forgot to call you and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess it just wasn't meant to be. And that's fine. And I didn't think anything about it. And a week or so goes by and the auction house calls me and asks me if I'm still interested in the car, because the guy who won the auction decided he didn't want it. Apparently he had bought it for his wife, and it had that red interior, bright red interior that I mentioned, and she didn't like that and whatever. So I said, yeah, I'm still interested. And so they connected me with that guy, and ultimately I bought the car from him for what he bought it at the auction for, which is probably good, because otherwise I'd have just been bidding against him at the auction, and it would have been more expensive. So now we're out on the road. Got some wind noise, no AC in this car, so we run with the window down over there. Anyway, I got the car from him, and I bought it, and that's how I ended up with this car. It was a weird auction situation. And thanks to my friends in the Porsche Club for connecting me with the auction house. So it's been a great car ever since, and it's a lot of fun. And we'll talk some more about some of the quirks and features, but let's just go driving right now. For an old girl, she still sounds good, and she's pretty quick. It's always hard to tell in videos, but the car pulls really nicely still. The transmission shifts nicely as well, so it's really been a good car for the years that I've owned it. And the odometer does appear to be reading. I did mention earlier that I wasn't sure the odometer was working, but it appears to be working just fine. And these cars, man, I tell you what, just, they're old. They are old. Still so much goodness in them, though. Such great cars, so fun, so smooth. You can drive them all day long. I've done it before, trust me, and it's just, man, it's just a great drive. Elias, I wish you were with me on this drive. This car is so nice and so smooth. You would be loving it. About 5,200 RPMs into fourth gear. This car has always had pretty hard shifts for a 928. Most 928s are pretty soft and smooth. This car has always had a little bit of a bump to it when it shifts gears. And with the old tires, it kind of breaks it free a little bit too. I watched a couple of videos that Doug DeMuro did, and he was talking about quirks and features of the 928. And he didn't understand that the lid for the door pocket is actually an extendable armrest. He's like, oh, that's a weird way that opens and whatever. And I was screaming at my computer while I was watching it, telling him, it's an armrest, it's an armrest. And what they did was, because the 928 is so wide, they didn't make the armrest flip in the door just flip up, it flips out towards you so that you can, if you don't have long arms, and Doug DeMira's like 6'3" or something like that, so he's like an 8. And his arms, he probably didn't notice that the door was so far away. But normal size people do, and short people especially do. So it's really great having an armrest that moves towards you to take up the space between your seat and the door itself for you to put your arm on. It was a great idea. I mean, Porsche did all kinds of really cool stuff with these cars that folks who maybe haven't read up on them just don't understand. Doug being one of them, I guess. Car's running great. 3 bar of oil pressure. Temperature's just below halfway. Got 3/4 of a tank of gas, and the ammeter is the only thing that's a little off, showing 12 amps, which we would always hope for a little more. All right, thanks for joining me. Click like, subscribe, and come back and see me again soon. We'll do another in-car video soon.